Hello! So this is a bit of a different and more casual video for me because today I am doing a try a chapter video. And when I've seen this video before, more often than not it's people who are trying to decide which books to keep and which books to get rid of. I'm not trying to declutter my collection at all. I still have plenty of space for more books. I am just trying to cause myself pain essentially by adding to my already epic TBR. There is a shelf of books, not in this room but in the other room, which holds a lot of books that I haven't read and don't have any immediate plans to read. I'll link my bookshelf tour up here so you can go and see the shelf that I'm talking about in that video, but basically I thought that I should change that and I should make some effort to add at least one of those books to my TBR. So I asked Lee to randomly select 5 books from that shelf that I hadn't read for me to try the first chapter of and decide whether I want to add it to my TBR. So I'm going to go through each of those books one at a time, read the first chapter and let you have my thoughts. So the first book is actually a short story called The Creature in the Case by Garth Nix, who has also written Sabriel, L'Oreal and Aborsen, which is the Old Kingdom series, which is a series I've actually heard of. Although this is a try a chapter video, this book is a short story, so it doesn't actually have any chapters, so I'm just going to read like a few pages and then come to a natural stopping point and let you know my thoughts. But oh, never mind, this is a short story that takes place after the events of that series, so I'm gonna skip past this one and go and ask Lee to pick me a different book, because I did not realise that this is going to have spoilers in it for the rest of the series, which I haven't read and I don't have any immediate plans to read, but in case I ever want to, I don't want to spoil myself, so I'm going to go and get Lee to pick me a different book. Okay, so Lee's picked me another book. It's called Dark Fire by C.J. Sansom, which is an author that I feel like I've heard of, but I don't know why. It's a pretty chunky book, pretty long, 560-ish pages, so and it looks like it probably is fantasy, so it's probably up my street, but I will read you the synopsis. It is 1540 and the hottest summer of the 16th century. Matthew Shardlake, believing himself out of favour with Thomas Cromwell, is busy trying to maintain his legal practice and keep a low profile. But his involvement with a murder case defending a girl accused of brutally murdering her young cousin brings him once again into contact with the king's chief minister and a new assignment. The secret of Greek fire, the legendary substance with which the Byzantines destroyed the Arab navies, has been lost for centuries. Now an official of the Court of Augmentations has discovered the formula in the library of a dissolved London monastery. When Shardlake is sent to recover it, he finds the official and his alchemist brother brutally murdered. The formula has disappeared. Now Shardlake must follow the trail of Greek fire across Tudor London, while trying at the same time to prove his young client's innocence. But very soon he discovers nothing is as it seems. Okay, I'm not sure about the genre of this now actually. It might be fantasy. Definitely historical fiction. It might be historical urban fantasy, which would be interesting, but it also sounds like it might be a crime novel as well. So, interesting. I am going to read the first chapter, which, oh dear, is pretty long. This video is going to take ages to film. The first chapter is 17 pages, so let's go. Okay, so I read the first chapter and I liked it. It's set in London, in the city of London actually, which is where I work. So it's really, I always really like it when there's references to streets and things in books that I recognise, because it really helps to ground me in the world. So I really enjoyed that. And it's, I'm not sure when this was published, but it's definitely got a sort of Dickensian Sherlock Holmes type vibe. It was printed in 2004, so it's not old, but it's got that older writing style. I'd say probably it's going to be historical fiction rather than fantasy. Quite often when the blurb mentions lawyers and the law and things, it's really not a feature in the story at all, but already our main character is a lawyer and there's quite a lot of references to the law. The first chapter has introduced us to the crime that has happened, that our protagonist is going to be attempting to defend the accused of this murder. And it seems like a really interesting story and I feel quite hooked by it already. So I think that this is definitely going to go on my TBR, and I might even read it fairly soon, because I mean, this has been on my shelf for years and I didn't even realise what it was about, and it's interesting. It's really quite, it sounds really interesting. It's 576 pages long, so a reasonably long novel. The print is quite small, but yeah, I'm impressed by this one already, and it's going on my TBR. So Dark Fire by CJ Sanson, thumbs up. The next book that I have to try a chapter from is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which is a classic, and this is one of the Penguin Popular Classics editions. I have had this on my shelf for a very long time, and I did actually try to read it once before, but I found the language really difficult to get on with. I was probably a little young at the time. I think I was in my early teens, and this is probably a little bit beyond, or was probably a little bit beyond me at that point. Oh, this looks like a really long first chapter as well. Yeah, this one's even longer. It's 21 pages. So I'll read you the synopsis. It's: upon seeing his own striking portrait, Dorian Gray is bewitched and offers his soul if only the painting will age while he remains eternally youthful. Believing himself incorruptible, Dorian indulges in a life of pleasure and excess, but what has become of his portrait? So I'm going to get into the first chapter of this and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, chapter 1 of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I got on better with it this time than the first time I tried to read it. The writing style is actually pretty similar to Dark Fire, but a bit more classical. This being a classic, that should be fairly obvious. It's a little bit verbose, I want to say, for my personal preferences. The first 20 pages of the book are essentially the artist of The Picture of Dorian Gray talking about why he's friends with Dorian Gray and why this piece of art is so important to him. And I'm not a particularly artistic person, so a lot of that went sort of over my head, but it was a pretty quick read and I flew through it fairly quickly. This is a classic that I do want to read at some point, but it's not necessarily high on my TBR, but it is good to know that I didn't find it as difficult to read this time around. The next book is Tricks of the Mind by Darren Brown, and this is actually a non-fiction book, which is kind of out of my wheelhouse, as you might know, but that's probably why it's a good thing that this is on here, because I do want to try and read more broadly this year, and so this, if I like the first chapter of this, would be a good one to add to my TBR to be something other than fantasy to read, which, to be honest, it sounds like both of these would fit that criteria as well. So I'll read you the synopsis. Darren Brown's television and stage performances have entranced and dumbfounded millions. His baffling illusions and stunning set pieces such as the seance, Russian roulette and the heist have set new standards of what's possible, as well as causing more than their fair share of controversy. Now, for the first time, he reveals the secrets behind his craft, what makes him tick, and just why he grew that beard. Tricks of the Mind takes you on a journey into the structure and psychology of magic. Darren also takes a long, hard look at the paranormal industry and why some of us feel the need to believe in it in the first place. Alternately hilarious, controversial and challenging, Tricks of the Mind is essential reading for Darren's legion of fans, and pretty bloody irresistible even for those who don't like him that much. It's a reasonably long book. Yeah, 383 pages and the font is pretty small. Let's see how long chapter 1 is. Oh, okay, there's a 2-page preface and then another 4-page preface, and then there aren't really chapters, there are really parts. So the first part is like 15 pages. I might just read the prefaces for this one and leave it at that, because those are a sort of an introduction to what the book is going to be about and the writing style and that sort of thing. So that should give me enough of an idea of whether or not it's going to be interesting for me. So I will read these prefaces and then let you know. Okay, so I've read the prefaces and they were amusing as anticipated. I think that this is a book that I'd be interested in reading, but it's not going to be super high on my list. I was just checking if there's an audiobook version, because I think this is actually the kind of book that would make a very good audiobook, but I think he's only done certain sections of it. So the part 2 is called Magic. It looks like there's an audiobook for Magic, and part 3 is called Memory, and it looks like there's an audiobook for that, as well as part 4, which is Hypnosis and Suggestibility. So I might see if they're available for free on a library and listen to them that way, because I do think that it would make an interesting audiobook experience, especially because it's actually narrated by Darren Brown, which I think is always nice when a non-fiction book is read by the author of that non-fiction book. So I think this would make an interesting read, but it's not necessarily super up there on my TBR, but I am glad that I picked it up and am considering reading it, because I do think, especially if I can get hold of an audiobook, that this would be an interesting one. Hello! So, my angle has probably changed, the lighting may have changed, and my outfit has changed. And that is because my camera ran out of battery and I needed to charge it and I got cold, so I put on a jumper and I had dinner, and now I'm back to film the rest of this video. So, moving on to book 4, we have The Double Life of Cassiel Road Knight by Jenny Valentine, and I think that this is a contemporary book, and quite honestly I have absolutely no memory of having this book, so it definitely hasn't been on my TBR because I don't even remember buying or being given this book. Don't know. But I'll read the synopsis. I didn't choose to be him. I didn't pick Cassiel Road Knight out of a lineup of possible people who looked just like me. I just let it happen. I just wanted it to be true. That's all I did wrong at the beginning. A fugitive teenager takes on the identity of another missing boy, but everyone has their secrets. Who will get to the truth first? Which sounds almost like a crime novel, maybe? Yeah. Chapter 1 is 17 pages long, so let's get into it. Okay, hold on. Just one thing. This book appears to be based in London. Now, we're going to skip past this one because this was non-fiction. This one, based in London. This one, based in London. This one, based in London. And Lee just randomly picked these books. He didn't read any synopsis or anything. He literally just went, these 5 from my shelf. That's weird. Okay, that's interesting. I actually I'm actually intrigued. So this first chapter starts off with a boy who appears to be being held by a man and a woman, and they're trying to find out who he is, and he won't tell them. And then they find a poster trying to find a missing boy named Cassiel Road Knight, who looks exactly the same as our main character, whose name we don't know. And he initially tells them, no, that's not me, but then he thinks to himself, well, why not pretend that it's me, then the real me will disappear. So we don't really know why it is that he doesn't want to tell them what his real name is, and we don't know why it is that he doesn't want to be himself, and we don't know who Cassiel Road Knight is, and we don't know who these 2 people are, and we don't know why he's with them, and we don't know why he's locked away, and it's reasonably intriguing. So yeah, I would definitely consider reading this one. Yeah, I think I'll put that on my TBR actually. And it seems like it's a mystery YA book, so that would be another one that would not be something that's in my typical genre. So yeah, maybe I'll add this to my TBR. I think what I'll do is at the end I will rank these 5 books in order of which order I would read them in, because so far that's 4 out of 5 that I would probably consider reading. Next, and last but not least, is Polar Shift by Clive Cussler, and this was given to me by a friend quite a long time ago, and I think it's sort of a thrillery, adventure-y type book, which is again really not my thing. So I'll read the synopsis. Giant freak waves send an unsinkable cargo ship to the bottom of the Atlantic, and a herd of killer whales attack a party of kayakers in the Pacific. Random events or evidence of polar shift. For Kurt Austin of Numa, these two seemingly unconnected incidents are harbingers of a global phenomenon that will mark the end of civilization. A secretive organisation aiming to bring down the world's elite powers has discovered the means to bring about polar shift, a catastrophic event that will cause earthquakes, lava eruptions, tsunamis, electrical disruptions, and giant whirlpools. Austin knows that he and Numa cannot fail this time. The end of the world is coming unless he and the team can track down the conspirators or reverse the effects of the Earth's most destructive power, polar shift. So actually it sounds like it's a apocalyptic book, end of the world, natural disaster type book, which I've seen a lot of films like that, but I've never read any books like that. So chapter 1, oh actually we have a prologue. So the prologue is quite long, very long, very long. Wow, the prologue is 30 pages. So yeah, that's going to take me quite a while to read. I'll see how I get on. It might be that I can't read all of that because, well, I want to read some of my main read this evening. But yeah, I'm gonna get into this and try and read the whole of the prologue, but we'll see how we get on. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I only made it to page 9, but honestly I can already tell this is not a book for me. I don't rule out ever reading it, like I might read it at some point in the future, but it's definitely not my thing. The opening is in wartime and I'm really not a fan of war-based fiction. It's not because I'm opposed to brutality in books. In fact, when it's handled well, I really enjoy brutality in books. And one of the main reasons that I didn't enjoy the Three Dark Crowns series, or what I've read of it so far, is that it was sold as a very brutal story, and it really wasn't, in my opinion. The Hunger Games is one of my favourite series ever, and it's very, very brutal. So it's not the brutality that I necessarily have a problem with, and there was brutality right from the beginning. We're talking rape and murder in the first few pages, and that's realistic, that's wartime, and we're talking Second World War here, but it's just not my kind of thing. I don't really like films that are about this kind of topic either. It's just not something I enjoy reading about, and I can't really put my finger on why it is. I think probably the reason is because I like to use reading as an escape from reality, and these kinds of books are a little bit too close to reality. I mean, it's based on actual events that happened in history and that were awful, and I acknowledge that, and I appreciate that knowing about those things and accepting that those things happened and were awful is important, but my reading time is a time for me to zone out, and this kind of book doesn't really help me do that. So I don't think this one's going to be going on my TBR, but I do think that Lee might enjoy it, and he doesn't really read very often. And I asked him the other day, I don't think he can remember the last time that he read a book, but he might be interested in this one, so I might see if I can persuade him to give the first chapter a go and see what he thinks. I'm not holding out much hope there, he's much more of a video gamer than a reader, but sadly this one is not really for me. So that leaves the other 4 that I have read. So I think top of the list would be Darkfire by C.J. Sansom, and I think I probably will put that on my immediate TBR because I found the first chapter of that one really, really interesting. Hello, so it's me from the future while I'm editing, and I was inputting these books into Goodreads so that I can actually read them, and I discovered that Darkfire is actually book 2 in a series. Book 1 is called Dissolution, which I actually have heard of, and that is why I have heard of the author C.J. Sansom before. So I've put book 1 on my TBR, and book 2, which is Darkfire, which is the one that I read in this video. Just thought I'd let you know. I'd then probably put The Double Life of Cassiel Road Knight. It wouldn't be super near the top of my TBR, but I was intrigued by the first chapter and interested to get to the bottom of some of those questions that were raised. Then we'd have The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is a classic, and I want to read more classics anyway, and the opening wasn't too bad. And then, wow, that was helpful. And then we have Tricks of the Mind by Darren Brown, which, as I mentioned before, I would probably try to find an audiobook of, because I think that I would really enjoy it as an audiobook narrated by Darren Brown. So yeah, I think that 4 out of 5 is really not bad for 5 books that have been sat on my shelf for a really long time and that I never even considered picking up, and now I will be picking up 4 of them and trying to get Lee to pick up this one. So I'd say that this video was pretty helpful for me. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed it too and that you found it helpful in some way. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button. I'd be so grateful, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.